Amigos, qué honor para mí poder estar compartiendo con una personalidad tan importante, no solamente para la cultura dominicana, sino para la cultura afroamericana. Y él es el doctor James Small. ¿Cómo se siente? Welcome to Aquitvshow.
Thank you. How do I say in Spanish?
Gracias.
Gracias. Thank you for having me here.
Well, for us and Aquitvshow, it's an honor to be sharing this segment with you, not only because of your relationship with the Dominican culture, but also for your knowledge in the African American culture. And we're going to talk about it a little bit. But I want you to tell me now, what do you understand is the connection that Dominican Republic has with the African culture?
The Dominican Republic, probably more than any culture in the Caribbean, is African. I would say the Dominican Republic is more African than Jamaica, more African than Trinidad. Maybe the only competition is Cuba. When you look at Dominican music, African. Dominican food, African. Dominican dance, movements, African. And you, of course, I am, by initiation, I'm a Santeros. I'm a Babalorisha of Oya. And so when we look at Santeria in Dominican Republic, that's Africa. That's the African religion tradition. But, I mentioned to you earlier, in 1968, I was in Dominican Republic with Pina Gomez, the Dominican Revolutionary Party, before the Americans abruptly pushed us out. And I've always been a very strong supporter of the Dominican people's aspirations to be free, especially from American dominance. And we haven't achieved it yet, but we will. My father-in-law happened to be from Dominican Republic. My daughter-in-law, who's expecting a baby in about 12 days, is from Dominican Republic. So I have a strong tie with Dominican Republic. But the people of the Dominican Republic come from Africa. They come from the Tainos and the Caribs. They come from Spain. And those three cultures amalgamate. But the dominant theme, if you look at the language, you would say, oh, Professor Small, I speak Spanish. And I would say, I would challenge you. You speak an African Spanish Creole, which is not the same as Spanish. And if you go to Spain, you and them will have an argument over what you're saying, because you're using a Spanish vocabulary and an African grammar structure in your speech. And that makes your speech different from someone from Valencia. And I was in the American military. I was stationed in Valencia, Alicante, Spain for many years. So I learned a lot about those cultures as well. But Dominican is one of the first places that Africans were bought as enslaved persons. But we brought with us our culture, our food, our values, our religion, and we never let it go. So if I want to find Africa, and somebody says, go to the Caribbean to find Africa, I would not go to Jamaica. I would go to the Dominican Republic, because I would find more Africa there. The way the family is structured, family relationship, the food, and the way the food is prepared, the rhythm in the music, that's right out of Africa.
And something funny, Dr. Small, is that for some reason, many Dominicans don't like to hear that. And I have a problem with that. However, because of the information that you have shared, I am going to personally and publicly invite you to our show so that we can go in deep into those belief in real truth of who we are.
Yeah.
But I know you mentioned something about music, and I do want to ask you, how do you think the music, and the African music and rhythm relates to our music in the Dominican Republic and as Latinos?
Yeah, I remember it was 1983, I was in Togo, and I heard this music, and I thought it was Dominican, so I'm out dancing, right? I was trying to do all of the Latin dances, and they didn't know where Dominican Republic was. So I'm saying, wait a minute, but you're playing the music. They said, no, this is Togolese music. The music is the same. The rhythms, the beats, the counts, the same. And the dance steps, the same. And so that's why when I think of Dominican Republic, I see more African there. And I know it's a pretty strong Catholic nation. But all of us know that Santeria is everywhere. And even when you go to church, if things are not going well, you go see the Santeros before you see the priest.
I know.
Okay? So what is Santeria? It's the religion we brought from Africa, and we married it with Catholicism to make a union. They call it syncretism. And so we put the two together to make one. And no one does it. Only Cuba can compete with you with their Lucumé in the whole Caribbean. And then, of course, Brazil, you know. But even here in America, black people didn't want to identify with Africa. It's only in the last 2 decades that we've really began to say, we're African.
To accept it, in other words.
But
Now,
for many years, we rejected it, you know.
Now, with that being said, I mean, how do you feel about the way the society is transitioning with technology, how teens, how youth are trying to fit in another culture that they really don't belong? What can you say about that? Or how can you compare it to the 1960s?
The key is to study history. History and culture is the key because it grounds you. It gives you self-value, self-worth, self-esteem, and self-respect. When you can refer back to your history and look at the great things your ancestors did, then you can see models for yourself, and you can compete with anybody in the world.
So in other words, Dr. Small, are you saying that our youth are lacking those principles and they trying to fit anywhere?
Right. They're lacking those principles of self-worth, self-value, self-esteem, self-respect, because their culture and history is being kept away from them or being made to be less than what it is. So they look up to other people's culture, other people's history, other people's values. But even just in Dominican Republic, if you go back in history, there never would have been a Haitian revolution except for Dominican Republic. People don't know. Toussaint Louverture, who leads the Haitian, he was trained in Dominican Republic. Dessalines, who won the revolution in Haiti against the French, was trained in Dominican Republic. So was Henri Christophe, the second president of Haiti. So just that little piece, Dominican Republic trained the 3 main leaders of the Haitian Revolution. Okay? But do we know that history, you know?
We do, we just don't share it.
Right, to put it in place so it can make sense to us, you know? Even when I was at City College teaching, our New York City Councilman, oh God, I forgot his name, but he was the Dominican student, radical student leader at City College. Now he's City Councilman in New York. My classmate, who was also one of the radical students with me then, he's now a Dominican representative in the City Council. How many people know how much influence the Dominican community have had on New York City politics, New York City government, and how education in New York is articulated? That's our history. We need to study. We need to know our history, you know. No, because Puerto Rico is tied to America differently, we tend to see the Puerto Ricans' role, but the Dominican population is as large as the Puerto Rican population, but no one talks about the role of the Dominican in New York politics, you know? And so it's a question of studying our history and teaching it to our children, study our culture, teach it to our children, let them know that you have the blood of the Taino Indians in your veins. Who were they? What was that culture? What were they like as a people? Much of the language that you speak, that you say is Spanish, you have Taino words in it, you have African words in it, you have Taino grammar, you have African grammar, and that makes up the language. But if you don't know that, you just say, I'm Spanish, you know, but if you went to Spain, they will reject you and say you're not. So you have to say why, because they recognize you have more, you know. So it's a fantastic culture.
Wow, señores, espero que todos ustedes en casita puedan apreciar la importancia de esta entrevista y lo importante que es conocer nuestra historia, estudiar, conocer nuestra identidad y nuestros ancestores. Así que, Dr. Small, thank you so much. As I said, we will have you again on Aquitvshow because there's a lot more information that I would like to learn.
And you're going to teach me Spanish, so I'll say gracias. And then I hope that when I come back, I will go to my daughter-in-law and say, you got to help your father learn some Spanish.
Of course, of course.
And remember our trip to Africa in March for the African Music Festival. And we hope to take Dominican bands with us so that Africa can be introduced to the Dominican Republic musically. They already have been the musicians, but the population needs to be. And the Dominican musicians can be introduced to the African musicians. So we'll be doing that the first week in March for the African Music Festival.
Oh, that's very interesting, Dr. Small. So for any artists, you know, not only Dominican but Latino who are interested in this trip to Africa, how can they contact you?
Contact our sister Al. Al is our organizer for the whole project. Okay.
So, amigos, ya saben, si están interesados en participar en ese viaje para África en marzo, para intercambiar la cultura de nosotros, no solamente la música, la comida y muchas cosas más, pueden contactarse con los números que están en pantalla. Dr. Small, thank you once again, and we hope to see you again on our screen at Aquitvshow. And thank you so much.
Gracias.
Amigos, continuamos con más de Aquitvshow.